There's been a lot of talk around Lane Kiffin's future with Ole Miss Football as their head coach. As we know, Lane Kiffin has a storied past of jumping ship, going team to team out of nowhere. But it seems like he has found the home down there in Oxford, Mississippi with the Rebels. They are having their best stretch of football in program history under Lane Kiffin. But there's been a lot of smoke around him leaving Ole Miss for Florida. And when you ask people why does it make sense for Lane Kiffin to take the Florida Gators job despite how down they've been these last couple of years and how much of a mess their NIL collective has been, they tell you Lane Kiffin has a better chance of winning a national championship at Florida versus what he does at Ole Miss. And they pretty much tell you that he doesn't have a shot at winning a national championship as the head coach of Ole Miss Football, but he has a great chance to win it at Florida, even though it's going to require a rebuild. I don't agree with that. He's done a really good job at Ole Miss of building that team up through recruiting and also utilizing the transfer portal. And this year's Ole Miss team is built similarly to what last year's Florida State team was. You know, you got a few recruits that you've developed, but you also got a few transfer portal guys that are going to be one and dones. They're going to be drafted high in the NFL draft next year, but not everybody that Lane Kiffin has gotten from the transfer portal is just one and done. He's also got a good amount of players from the portal that he has taken in. He is developing them, and he's not trying to make them stars right away, but he's trying to develop them so they can become stars within the span of the next 2-3 years. So you got somebody that is doing a great job of leveraging recruiting in the transfer portal, but also making sure that he's just not looking for guys in the transfer portal who can just produce right away. He's looking for guys in the portal that he can develop to become contributors for this squad later down the road. And with this new age of college football, you know, I think that this is going to be a recipe that a lot of other coaches are going to start taking and utilizing at different programs that aren't really known for having a lot of top-notch facilities. With the playoffs expanding to 12 teams and with how unpredictable college football tends to be, there is a chance that Ole Miss could win it all this year. Now, we haven't seen them play any good teams this year. They've been playing some low-level FBS, FCS schools, but this is a team that is more than capable of being able to win the SEC this year because they got a favorable schedule. And if you can take advantage of having the easiest schedule in this conference, you can somehow win the SEC title game. You give yourself a first-round bye in the college football playoffs. You know, I don't think that with the playoffs expanding anymore, it's impossible to win a natty at a certain school just because they don't have as much resources as what a other bigger program like Florida does. Kalen DeBoer had the 34th rated roster according to 24/7 Sports Team Talent Composite rankings last year and took the Huskies to the national championship. And during that stretch, they beat Dan Lanning and Oregon twice that season that they went to the Natty. And Oregon had a vastly more superiorly talented roster than what Kalen DeBoer had at Washington. But Kalen DeBoer is a great coach. He's able to get guys that fit his scheme, and he can elevate them with his coaching. Lane Kiffin has the ability to do the same thing. And if Lane Kiffin is as good as a head coach as what most of us hype him up to be, then he should be able to elevate this Ole Miss football program. If Kalen DeBoer can take Washington to the national championship 2 years removed from Jimmy Lake damn near burning that program into irrelevancy, Lane Kiffin can do the same thing at Ole Miss. There are plenty of coaches that are doing more with less, and with now 12 teams being able to get into the dance, you're going to see teams that come out of nowhere that nobody thought they could ever really be that good. They get into the playoffs and they surprise a few folks because you got coaches that don't need all these high-tech facilities. They don't need a huge NIL back collective, to be successful wherever they're at. And Lane Kiffin, there's no reason to leave your current situation for Florida because you got a really good infrastructure. You got a program that is more than willing to give you anything that you need to compete. They're willing to make changes. They're willing to make adaptations to appease you. Going to a school like Florida that has had so much dysfunction inside of their program. Look at the whole Jaden Rashada lawsuit. That should be a pretty clear indicator that Florida isn't really the most stable program in the world, and they're not really patient either. It may take you a little bit longer to rebuild Florida football than what it would take you to win a national title at Ole Miss. I'm not saying that being in the Florida landscape doesn't give Lane Kiffin a better chance to win it all than what he has at Ole Miss, but I don't really see a big benefit in him leaving Ole Miss for Florida just because you're incentivizing recruiting. Lane Kiffin thought that the grass was greener when he left OU for USC because he's in Cali. Cali's one of the 3 biggest states that produces the most high-level blue-chip prospects, and look at how USC's recruiting has kind of struggled these past couple of years until now. Just because you take a job that is perceived to be better because of where they're located in terms of recruiting, it doesn't necessarily mean you're always going to be able to maximize that recruiting potential. You know, there are other factors that go into how well a team can recruit outside of where they're located. So if I'm Lane Kiffin, I wouldn't leave Ole Miss. You don't need to leave Ole Miss to win a national championship. But if he wants to leave Ole Miss just because he loves the state of Florida, because I've talked to a few people inside of FAU's football program, and they say that Lane Kiffin, you know, he loves Florida. He has a couple of properties in Florida that he frequently visits during his hours when he has some downtime to chill and relax with his family and kids and whatnot. So I wouldn't be too surprised if he took the Florida job, but if he's taking the job because he doesn't believe he can win a natty at Ole Miss, I just don't think it's a good decision because you definitely can win at Ole Miss with what you have right now. You got one of the highest odds to win the SEC title. So that shows you that you can build Ole Miss into a contender. Look at what you have turned them into right now. You know, a few years ago, nobody ever thought that Ole Miss could reach this level, even when they had Hugh Freeze and he was rolling.